My friends, you can't imagine what it's like to come back to your own home after 15 days in the hospital, only to find out that your key no longer opens the door. Yes, you heard that right. At 75 years old, after 47 years of paying for every brick, every roof tile, every single cent invested in those walls that hold so many memories, I was betrayed in the most cowardly way possible. My name is Eleanor, and today I'm going to tell you a story that made me question everything I believed about family, about the values I tried to teach through a lifetime of sacrifices. When I walked out of that hospital, with my heart still weak after the heart attack that almost took me to be with my beloved husband, Mitchell, I only thought of one thing. Getting home, sitting in my rocking chair in the yard, drinking a cup of chamomile tea, and thanking God for giving me another chance at life. The taxi driver helped me out at the corner of my street. I walked slowly, still feeling my legs trembling, carrying only a small bag with my medication and the clothes I had been wearing when I was rushed to the hospital. My neighbors waved from across the street, and I smiled, thinking how good it was to be back in my neighborhood, where everyone has known each other forever, where children still respect their elders, and where the smell of fresh pancakes fills the morning air. But when I reached the door of my house, that little one-story home with light blue walls I had chosen so many years ago, something was different. The lock was new, completely new. I tried to fit in my key, that little golden key I had carried for decades, and it wouldn't go in. I thought maybe it was the medication making me confused, or maybe I was just too weak to turn it properly. I tried again, and again, and again. The truth started to sink in like a heavy stone on my chest. Someone had changed the lock on my own house while I was fighting for my life in the hospital. Someone who had the keys, someone I trusted, someone who knew exactly when I wouldn't be there to defend myself. At that moment, standing on the sidewalk in front of the house where I raised my daughter, where I cried over my husband's death, where I celebrated every birthday, every Christmas, every Mother's Day, I realized I was about to find out just how far human cruelty can go, even when it comes disguised as your own flesh and blood. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen, with that useless key in my hand, trying to understand what was happening. I knocked on the door. I called out for Dakota, my daughter who had always been so attached to me. The house seemed empty, but I knew it couldn't be, because all the plants in my garden were well taken care of, the windows were clean, and there was a brand new pickup truck parked out front that I didn't recognize. That's when Mrs. Edith, my neighbor of 40 years, came closer with that look on her face, like she had bad news to deliver. She kept her eyes on the ground, fidgeting with her hands, and I could already feel my heart racing in a way the doctors had warned me against. Edith told me that 3 days after I was admitted, Dakota had arrived with a moving truck. She told all the neighbors that I had decided to sell the house to her, that I was moving in with my sister in another city, and that she and her family were moving in to take better care of the property. The irony is, I don't have a sister in another city. I don't have a sister anywhere. My only sister, Abigail, died 20 years ago from diabetes, and I would never, ever sell the house I built with so much love alongside my Mitchell. This house isn't just a place where I live. It's the temple of my life. It's where every corner of these walls knows my tears, my joys, my dreams. Edith said she tried talking to Dakota, that she found it strange I hadn't said goodbye to anyone, but my daughter was very convincing. She even showed a paper that supposedly proved the deed to the house had been transferred to her name. Since Edith can't read very well, she believed it. Just like all the other neighbors believed it. Just like I myself might have believed it if I were in their shoes, because I could never have imagined that a daughter could do something like this to her own mother. I sat down on the sidewalk and cried in a way I hadn't cried since the day I buried my husband. But this time, it wasn't just sadness. It was a mix of despair, anger, and a pain in my chest that had nothing to do with my weak heart. It was the pain of realizing that the child you once breastfed, the one you protected from every danger in the world, had grown up to steal the only possession you had left. Dakota hadn't just taken my house. She had stolen my dignity, my story, my identity. Because without that house, who was I? Just an old woman with no place in the world, no roof to call her own. Night fell far too quickly on that day that seemed endless. The lights of the neighboring houses flickered on one by one, and I was still sitting there on the sidewalk, staring at my own home that was now forbidden to me. Edith offered me coffee and a sandwich, but my stomach was so tight I couldn't swallow a thing. She even invited me to spend the night at her house, but I refused. Not out of pride, but because I still held on to a foolish hope that Dakota would come home and explain that it was all just a misunderstanding. Around 10 at night, I saw the lights turn on inside my house. My heart skipped a beat. I stood up from the sidewalk, smoothed down my wrinkled dress, and knocked hard on the door. I heard footsteps, voices, movement inside. I shouted Dakota's name, begged her to open the door, explained that I was her mother, that I had just gotten out of the hospital, that I had nowhere else to go. From the other side of the door, I heard her voice, low, telling the children to stay quiet. Then silence again. She was inside. My daughter was inside my house, hearing her 75-year-old mother, still weak from a heart attack, begging outside in the street to be let in. And she chose to stay silent. She chose to ignore me as if I were a stranger asking for alms at her door. I went back to the sidewalk and lay down right there, using my bag of medicine as a pillow. I had nowhere to go. My daughter was the only family member who lived nearby, and even she didn't want to open the door of my own house. The concrete was cold, so very cold, and all I had was the thin dress I had been wearing when I was admitted. People passed by and looked at me with pity. Some stopped to ask if I needed help, but I didn't even know what to say. How do you explain to a stranger that your own daughter has thrown you out of your house? How do you put into words a betrayal that deep? The night wind ached in my bones, and I shivered so much my teeth chattered. I looked up at the stars and whispered to my Mitchell, asking him to give me strength to understand why this was happening. I asked him where we had gone wrong raising Dakota, what values we failed to teach, what love we failed to give, because no one is born cruel. Something happens along the way that hardens a heart so much that not even a mother's love can soften it. When morning came, I felt more dead than alive. My body ached, my head throbbed, and I could barely get up from the sidewalk. Edith brought me hot coffee and helped me to my feet. She was the one who told me I needed to seek help, that what Dakota had done couldn't just be left as it was. She took me to the neighborhood health clinic, where a nurse checked my blood pressure and told me I needed to take my medication and rest, or else I would have another heart attack. But how could I rest with nowhere to go? How could I take my medicine without even water to drink? It was the nurse herself, a young woman named Scarlett, who told me to seek out the public defender's office to try to resolve the situation. She explained that what Dakota had done was called embezzlement, that it was a crime, and that I had rights, even as a poor, uneducated old woman. The next day, Edith went with me to the city center. I'll never forget that walk, because with each step, I felt like I was fighting for my very life. Not the life of my body, which the doctors had already saved, but the life of my dignity. We arrived at a large building, full of desperate people like me, each with their own stories of injustice and despair. The lawyer who assisted me, Ms. Allison, was a young woman with kind eyes. When I told her my story, I saw tears in her eyes. She explained that it was going to be difficult because Dakota had surely prepared herself, had fake documents, had created a convincing story. But she also told me that the truth always comes out, that people like Dakota always make mistakes, because lies don't last forever. So began a battle that lasted months. Some nights I stayed at Edith's house. Other times the priest allowed me to sleep inside the church. Meanwhile, I watched Dakota coming and going from my house as if she were the rightful owner. I saw her redoing my garden, painting my walls, hosting guests in my yard where Mitchell and I had shared so many Sunday morning coffees. And every time I tried to talk to her, she ignored me. It was as if she wanted to wear me down into giving up. But I had nowhere else to go, and that was still my house. Ms. Allison discovered that Dakota had forged my signature on several documents. She found out that my hospitalization had been used to speed up a fraudulent property transfer. After 8 long months of sleeping on the street, in shelters, and in the homes of kind neighbors, justice finally came. Ms. Allison proved all the fraud Dakota had committed. The judge ruled that the house be immediately returned to me and that Dakota pay compensation for the moral and material damages she had caused. More importantly, she was sentenced to 3 years in prison for forgery and embezzlement. On the day I received my keys back, my hands trembled so much I could barely fit them into the lock. When the door opened and I stepped inside my home, it felt like breathing again after months underwater. Dakota had changed a lot, painted the walls, taken away some furniture, altered my garden. But it was my house, my home, the place where I belonged. I found a few things she hadn't taken. Old photos, the letters Mitchell wrote me when we were dating, the rosary my mother gave me on my wedding day. These things had no value to Dakota, but to me they were treasures. They were proof that my life had meaning, that I had loved and been loved, that I was more than just a disposable old woman. Dakota served only 1.5 years of her sentence, released for good behavior. We never spoke again. Sometimes I see her from a distance at the market or in the square, and she looks away. I know she had more children after the ones I knew, and it pains me to think that innocent children are being raised by someone capable of doing what she did to me. But that's no longer my responsibility. I did my part as a mother. I loved the best way I knew how. I gave all I had to give. I'm still living in my little house. Edith is still my dear neighbor, and we've made other friends who join us for coffee on Sunday afternoons. Ms. Allison has become like a daughter to me. She visits often and says my case inspired her to help other elderly people in similar situations. I've learned that family isn't just blood. Family is the people who stand by your side when you need them, the ones who reach out their hand when you fall, the ones who see you as a human being worthy of love and respect. Dakota may have been born from my womb, but the people who helped me when I needed it most, those are my true family. And if there's one thing I want to leave with you, who have listened to me this far, it's this: never stop fighting for what's right. Justice may take time, it may be hard, but it always comes to those who have the patience and the courage to wait.